shaken by their terrible defeat at Fredericksburg on December 13, 1862. Lincoln needed a general who could destroy Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. First, Lincoln tried Winfield Scott, but he was too old to lead an army in the field. Then he gave the command to Irwin McDowell, but replaced him after the rout at the First Bull Run. Next, Lincoln put George McClellan in charge, but McClellan was too cautious, and Lee, though outnumbered, pushed him back. Next, Lincoln gave John Pope a try, but removed him after the awful defeat at the Second Bull Run. Then Lincoln reinstated McClellan, but had to remove him again when he saw that McClellan wouldn't move to fight the rebels. Lincoln asked Ambrose Burnside to lead the army. Burnside commanded only at the Battle of Fredericksburg. That battle was such a disaster for the North that Lincoln accepted Burnside's request to be relieved. Lincoln now put Joseph Hooker in the top spot. Hooker turned out to be a good organizer and improved greatly the condition of the Army of the Potomac. He was very confident that his splendidly equipped 130,000-man force would quickly defeat Robert E. Lee's 60,000 ragged Southerners. But Lincoln saw that Hooker was a little too confident. It was almost as though Lincoln could see into the future when he advised Hooker, "In your next battle, put all your men into the fight." Hooker wouldn't tell Lincoln or anybody else about his battle plans. One thing seemed sure, though. The Bluecoats wouldn't attack again at Fredericksburg, especially since the Confederates had strengthened their fortifications there. Hooker ordered John Sedgwick and 40,000 men to keep Lee occupied at Fredericksburg while ordering a flank march. 70,000 infantry with artillery would cross the Rapidan and Rappahannock rivers about 10 to 20 miles upstream from Fredericksburg. Hooker was attempting to get in behind Lee's army. Hooker believed this would either make Lee retreat to cover Richmond or force him to fight at a terrible disadvantage in both numbers and positioning. Hooker also collected 10,000 cavalry and ordered a raid behind Lee's army to cut Lee's supplies and communications with the Confederate capital. Because of a late start due to heavy rains, the raid failed, so Hooker had almost no cavalry to call on when the time came to fight against Lee. But Hooker's flank march with 70,000 infantry was well carried out. The Yankees succeeded in getting behind Lee. General George Meade, who would later be commander of the Union Army at Gettysburg, was quoted as saying, "This is splendid, Slocum. We are on Lee's flank, and he does not know it." And Hooker said, "Now Lee must give us battle or ingloriously fly." When Lincoln kept changing generals, he wasn't just being flaky or overly impatient. It was Lee and Stonewall Jackson with their veteran, high-spirited Southern Army who were creating most of Lincoln's problems and defeating the Union armies again and again. Hooker believed his successful march had decided the outcome of the war. What he didn't count on was Lee. Although fooled at first about Hooker's intentions and now finding the Union army around behind him, Lee moved fast. He left 10,000 Confederates under Jubal Early at Fredericksburg to hold Sedgwick in check and marched the rest of his army to Chancellorsville. Lee knew where the Union army had crossed the river, and since all the roads converged on Chancellorsville, Lee correctly guessed that the main Union force would be there. Hooker should have pushed toward open ground where his superior numbers and artillery could have made a difference, but instead, at first contact with Lee's army, Hooker lost his nerve and ordered his troops back into the woods. Hooker's generals saw that order as a huge mistake, but they obeyed and pulled back. Lee and Jackson spent the night of May the 1st trying to decide where to attack the Union army. They found the Federals were strongly entrenched on their left flank and on their front, but it was found that the Yankee right flank was up in the air, which meant that the Bluecoats on that flank were not protected by any natural barriers such as a river or entrenchments they had prepared. Lee sent about 26,000 men under Jackson to hit Hooker's exposed right flank, while he kept about 18,000 on Hooker's front to keep Hooker's main force in place. This was a very dangerous plan, because if Lee was again dividing his small army and Hooker decided to attack, Lee's scattered forces would be in a terrible fix. But Lee seemed to know that Hooker would not attack, and Lee knew that if he could hit the Yankee line endwise with his surprise attack, he had a fair chance of destroying the Union Army. Reports of Jackson's flank march arrived at Hooker's headquarters, but Hooker falsely believed that Lee's army was retreating. Hooker thought the thick woods on his right were enough to prevent an attack. The Union soldiers were unprepared for what happened next. The Yankees were amused to see foxes, squirrels, deer, and rabbits come running through their lines, but they were not amused to see and hear what was driving them forward. Out of the woods came Jackson's 26,000, screaming the rebel yell, shooting and taking prisoners. This attack threw the entire 11th Corps into a panic, which spread to each Yankee line that tried to stop it. The Confederates pushed the Union forces back over 2 miles before the Northerners could reorganize enough resistance to stop them. Lee's 18,000 also joined in the attack, which lasted until after dark. Only isolated pockets of resistance served to stem the rebel rush. That night, as Stonewall Jackson and his staff were returning from a scouting mission, some Confederates mistook them for Union cavalry. The rebels poured a volley into their own leaders. Jackson was hit twice in the left arm and once in the right hand. Jackson's arm had to be removed, but he was expected to recover. Jeb Stuart was given command of Jackson's corps. On May 3rd, Hooker ordered General Sedgwick at Fredericksburg to fight his way through to rescue the main army around Chancellorsville. Sedgwick threw his 3 divisions at Jubal Early's prepared rebels. The first 2 attacks were forced back, but the Yankees took the hill on the 3rd try in a genuine bayonet charge. Hooker should have ordered his troops around Chancellorsville to attack. Apparently, he forgot Lincoln's advice to put all of your men into the fight. Almost half of Hooker's men had not been used in the battle. Hooker ordered his troops to fall back and regroup, causing them to give up what good positioning they did have. Then Hooker was further stunned when a cannonball hit a doorway he was standing under. General Hooker recovered in time to retain command of his army, unfortunately for the North. Successful as it was, the Southern attack bogged down in some places. Confederate General Samuel McGowan's South Carolina Brigade, exhausted, out of ammunition, and horrified at the thought of further combat, refused to advance on the Union line. After repeated pleading, plotting, and threats to no avail, the Stonewall Jackson Brigade marched over them and continued the attack. Lee got word of Sedgwick's breakthrough and had to move fast. Correctly believing that Hooker would stay put, Lee put most of his army toward the east to attack Sedgwick. Sedgwick fought off the rebel attacks, but he pulled back across the river when he got word that Hooker had ordered a general retreat. Lee planned yet another attack for May the 6th, but found the Yankees gone. Lee did not destroy the entire Union Army as he had hoped, but both North and South realized that Lee had won an important victory. Lee had taken a poorly equipped and badly outnumbered army and had forced back yet again a greatly superior enemy. But that victory came at a high cost. The South lost 13,000 casualties and the North lost 17,000. And since the North had about 3 times as many people as the South had a harder time replacing the troops they had lost. And the South never was able to replace Stonewall Jackson, the general who made the great victory at Chancellorsville possible. 8 days after he was shot, Stonewall Jackson died of his wounds. His last words were, "Tell A.P. Hill to prepare for action. No, let us cross over the river and rest under the shade of the trees." When Lincoln heard the magnitude of the Northern defeat, he said, "My God, what will the country say? What will the country say?" Lincoln's next action was to remove General Hooker from command, and he put General George C. Meade in charge. Lincoln hoped Meade would be the general who could win the Civil War for the North. The American Civil War was fought between the northern and southern states from 1861 to 1865. For many years, trouble had been brewing between the two sections, but the trouble came to a head when Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860. The Southerners felt they were underrepresented in the government and seceded from the United States. Attempting to create a new country, the Confederacy chose Jefferson Davis as its president. Lincoln would not have the country torn apart and sent the Union Army south to restore the United States. The Southerners were riled because they felt they were being invaded by Yankees. At first, the Northerners were riled because they felt that it shouldn't be up to each state to create its own country. But by 1863, Northern war aims included the destruction of slavery. Now, because the North had the most people, factories, railroads, and money, many felt that the Union would quickly put down the rebellion. But Northern generals McDowell, McClellan, Burnside, and Hooker were no match for Southern generals like Lee, Jackson, Johnston, and Longstreet. During the first 2 years of the war between the states, the Southern forces won almost every major land battle. It wasn't until Northern generals such as Grant, Sherman, Sheridan, and Thomas took command that Union troops could win meaningful victories. The North was also aided by a large navy which blocked supplies from reaching the South. As the war dragged on, the Southerners had to do without shoes, food, modern weapons, and so on. After fighting more than 10,000 battles within 4 years, the Civil War ended when Lee surrendered his starving army to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse. Over 624,000 Americans died in the Civil War, which is more than all our other wars combined. Unfortunately for the United States, President Lincoln was assassinated a few days after the war ended. The Union was restored and slavery was abolished, but much bitterness remained and many problems are yet to be solved. Despite this and the vast destruction brought by the terrible war, most historians agree that America was a stronger and better country after the Civil War than it was before it. The uniforms of the North and South were mostly all made of wool. Hats, coats, pants, and socks. These were heavy, hot, and scratchy.
but wool was durable and it kept the soldiers warm even when it got wet. The northern soldiers wore dark blue and the southerners wore gray. Sometimes the southerners dyed captured Union coats with walnut shells, making a tan color known as butternut. Most soldiers were issued a cartridge box, belt, a rubber-coated blanket, pouch, canteen for carrying water, a bayonet, and a .58 caliber rifled musket. To load the 10-pound musket, a soldier would take a cartridge from his box, bite off one end of the paper, pour the loose powder down the barrel, drop the big bullet and paper down on top of it, and pack the whole business down with a ramrod. He would replace the ramrod, put a cap under the hammer, and when he pulled the trigger, the spark from the cap would explode the powder, firing the gun. If a soldier worked fast, he could shoot 2 or 3 shots per minute. A long triangular bayonet attached to the end of the musket. These were mostly a morale weapon. The soldiers did not like to get close enough to use them, usually. The officers were normally armed with a sword and a short-range 6-shot black powder pistol. Some soldiers, called artillerymen, fired the cannons. Some rode horses. They were called cavalry. Civil War soldiers ate beef jerky, hardtack, canned beans, eggs, cheese, sweet potatoes, and coffee. And sometimes when they could get it, they had ham, bacon, chicken, lobster salad, oysters, and lemonade or whiskey. Many times, dishonest government contractors sold hardtack too hard to chew and meat that was spoiled and full of worms. The Civil War soldiers had to eat it. Medical care was not very good during the Civil War, although both sides did their best. Doctors knew very little about germs, and antibiotics were not known at all. So if a wound in the arm or leg became infected, the limb was usually amputated to save the soldier's life. If the water looked clear and smelled all right, it was thought to be perfectly safe to drink. Because of poor sanitation methods and a lack of scientific knowledge, it is said that more Civil War soldiers died of diseases than bullets. Aside from the medical field, there were many technological breakthroughs. The Civil War was the first war to use mostly rifled muskets, high-altitude observation balloons, ironclad ships, trench warfare, machine guns, railroads, telegraph, mass production of food and factory goods, and many more things. Both sides were fiercely patriotic, and both the Northern Yankees and the Southern rebels believed that God would help them win the war.
Junior Civil War Reenactors is a unique learning experience that has been highly praised by students, parents, and teachers. The program has been featured on television and in newspapers.
A major Civil War battle was fought this week in Weld County. It was actually part of a living history lesson. The soldiers came from the ranks of a middle school in Evans. Roger Wolf reports from the front lines.
The fate of the Confederacy is at stake here on the outskirts of Chattanooga. The rebel forces are fighting to keep the Yankees from taking Tennessee.
They're trying to take our land away.
The blue and gray skirmish back and forth through the woods and hills. This is shaping up as one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War. The fighting is fierce there on the banks of Chickamauga Creek, and the casualties are mounting.
I think I got shot 3 times now.
The withering fire from cannon and rifles tests the courage of soldiers on both sides of the battle.
How do you keep your men motivated?
We don't. Really, they're just sort of roaming around. You yell at them and then they usually listen after a while.
And it isn't just men fighting in this battle.
I didn't think they let ladies fight in the Civil War.
Now they do.
Now is 1993, and these soldiers are students from 2 schools in Evans. They're staging this battle to bring a history lesson to life.
The Battle of Chickamauga was about the last big Confederate victory. It was the biggest battle of the Western Theater.
Darrell Osborne is a history buff who started a business recreating battles for schools. He provides the uniforms, guns, swords, cannons, and sound effects. The schools provide the soldiers who get a learning experience no book or movie can duplicate.
There's a lot more to it than books say. It's a lot harder.
What I've learned from this is how difficult it must have been for the people to organize this sort of thing. I mean, we've got about 100 students out here, and I feel like I've just been working like crazy to get it ready. And in this particular battle, there were like over 60,000 men on each side.
I don't think it'd be really fun in life, but this is just for fun, so it's pretty cool.
After their fun day on the battlefield, these student soldiers head back for the classroom, back to 1993. In Evans, Roger Wolf, 9 News.
Thousands of students have actively participated in this program. The purpose of Junior Civil War reenactors is to create a lasting interest in Civil War history. The students, 4th through 7th grade, develop true appreciation of the subject because they experience a little bit of the Civil War soldier's life. They learn and remember details that normally have little meaning to them if only read from a book. Uniforms are hot. Equipment is heavy. Marching makes the feet tired. Officers can be obnoxious. The terror of being in a battle. These things serve to create a feeling of respect and appreciation for the hardships and dangers of the Civil War soldier. Yet, students report the experience as one of the most fun things they have ever done at school.
What'd you think? Did you have a good time?
Yeah.
Did you guys learn something?
Yeah.
What'd you learn? What was the biggest thing that you learned?
We learned how hard it was to carry all that stuff on our backs.
And hot clothes.
Yeah. I'm learning that they had a lot of tough times and that if you didn't do a lot of stuff right, you get killed probably.
The battle is preceded by about 10 hours of training spread out over 2 weeks. The students get a bit of light military drill and are taught how to fight the mock battle safely. They are encouraged to employ their best acting skills, as a movie is made from each reenactment. The kids love it and exhibit newfound self-control. Students are shown real Civil War equipment, and they are encouraged to ask questions throughout the training period. Safety rules and procedures reinforce respect for the safety of fellow students. The students realize that although reenacting a battle is fun, being in a real Civil War battle would not be fun at all. Most students come away with an enlightened and sobering understanding of the American Civil War. The lesson makes them better informed world citizens. Students develop a camaraderie with their unit and their school. Parents are delighted when their children, possibly for the first time, come home enthused and excited about history.
My daughter has been talking about it for months.
Really?
And every night when she comes home and Daryl's been there working with him, she goes through everything that he's talked about.
The conversations at home prior to this actually happening, an amazing amount of awareness and the futility of the whole thing. So it's been a good learning experience.
Do you think that this would be something that could be used more widespread in our community?
Well, I'd like to see it. I think it'd be wonderful. You know, get them out of the classroom and do some real-life experience type things.
Seems-
Reenactors or...
Exactly. And
I think it's sink in a lot more.
Teachers are enthusiastic about this program because of its integrated curriculum possibilities.
This is the second year that we've had Daryl come and do a Civil War battle reenactment. And in all the things that we do in the summer, when the kids came back this year, they wanted to know if Daryl was coming back. When they found out he was, some of them planned their whole summer around this week. He's a good storyteller, and he has little stories that he talks about the Civil War that really brings the era to life for these kids. They're not only learning about the Civil War, but one of the benefits that I saw, one of the things I was impressed about was that they also learn how to shoot a movie. They set up scenes and take a shot, and it's just another benefit of the program that we've noticed.
It is a truly unique program that can involve teachers, parents, and the community. Best of all, the Junior Civil War Reenactment program is not expensive. To find out how to get a reenactment for your elementary or middle school, please contact Junior Civil War Reenactors, area code 303-935-9292.